Okay, she be going every single night. Day and night on my mind, pushing you to vibe.
How's it going, everybody? This is DSTRYR. Hope you're having another great day, and welcome back to another video. Alright folks, it's time for another edition of Bad Game Reviews. In this series, I'll talk about all the games that I have in my collections for the PlayStations 1, 2, 3, and 4 that I find to just be insanely bad. And today, the game that we're going to be reviewing is Need for Speed Undercover. Now, for those that don't know, the Need for Speed cover is probably one of the best arcade racing franchises of all time. It has so many great games, from Most Wanted, Hot Pursuit, Underground, Carbon, a whole bunch of great racing games. But unfortunately, it does also have its low moments, and unfortunately, this one was the lowest of the lows of the Need for Speed video game franchise. This game was developed by Black Box and released by Electronic Arts back in November of 2008 for the PlayStation 3. It was also released for the Xbox 360 and PC, and it takes place in a more fictionalized version of either Los Angeles or San Francisco, somewhere around that area, but it's somewhere in the California area. This game is a complete departure from what you usually play in the other Need for Speed games. Here, you actually play as an undercover agent for the state FBI. Here, you're asked to go undercover to try to solve a crime ring that has been going on throughout the city of San Francisco. And so you act as more of a street racer, beating a whole bunch of guys and getting into those rings so you can see exactly what's going on, take them out, and hopefully bring a stop to the crime ring in San Francisco. However, there are a few surprises that go along the way, including finding out near the end of the game, spoiler alert, that your own leader, your own boss, is actually the leader of this crime ring and is a corrupt member of that ring herself. And so you have to stop her before things end up getting seriously worse. And really, that's a plot twist that you would not have seen coming if you did not play this game. I played this and I did not expect this at all. Again, Need for Speed is such a great franchise, but unfortunately, this one was not fully built like it was an actual true Need for Speed video game. This is probably the worst game of the entire franchise in my opinion, and there are plenty of reasons why. And I'm going to start out with the story. The story of this game, like I said, is a departure from the other Need for Speed games, because here you are an undercover agent that is posing as an illegal street racer instead of being just an outright illegal street racer, just like in all the other Need for Speed games that you have played before. And to be honest with you, I feel like that it really doesn't bode well with all the other Need for Speed games that have been played in the past. I mean, I just don't really feel like that posing as an illegal street racer as an undercover agent really fits well within the story. In fact, in all previous Need for Speed games, usually some of the best games feature characters that get you right into the action. You know, you're playing right away as part of a street racing scene. It's really just part of that illegal scene of racers in which you're just going up against some of the best. Here, you're stepping in as an agent in which you're trying to stop a crime ring, and the only way to do that is to get in as an illegal street racer yourself and for the police to stop treating you as a friendly as a result of that. I mean, I really don't know. It just doesn't feel right. There are also a couple of famous actors as well. You know, you have the likes of Maggie Q in there that's acting as the leader along with Paul Pape. And you also have actress and singer Christina Milian in the game as well. So you do have a bit of star power in this game that you are playing with. And, you know, as good as it is to have that kind of star power as some of the characters in this game, unfortunately, some of the cutscenes and some of the acting, it just did not work very well. I'm gonna be honest with you, some of the lines that they said in those cutscenes along in the game, they were just weren't very well thought out. In fact, they were performed rather poorly in my opinion, and unfortunately, it just doesn't fit in well with the rest of the game. I think one of the reasons why this game really failed, in my opinion, is because although they have these big name, big list actors in this game, the acting in itself is just not that very good. And unfortunately, it just doesn't make it feel like a true Need for Speed game. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's good to have actors like them in there. I mean, it really brings the game a lot more attention. But if you're going to have them in there, you need to let them do what they do best. Just act the way that they usually do when they're in other shows and in other movies. Here, they were expecting them to just act completely different in my opinion. And unfortunately, as a result, the story just felt completely flat. And a lot of everything else that took place in the story as well, it just wasn't very good. And combine that with what I just said in regards to the plot, and you get a Need for Speed game that's just feels like it is completely unoriginal and completely sheds off what it really should be out of a Need for Speed video game. It's really an unfortunate departure from all the other Need for Speed video games, and unfortunately it just doesn't make it feel like a true arcade racer. It's just a complete ball drop from all the other Need for Speed games that have been played in the past. Next thing I want to talk about is the gameplay, and usually in past Need for Speed games they would be extremely difficult. I mean, even if I was playing on easy mode, which I rarely do, I usually play on normal mode, but even in those times, you know, usually you would have to work all the way from the bottom and go all the way to the top. You know, obviously it starts hard right away and it stays hard all the way to the end. You have to work very hard just so that way you can be able to beat this game. The difficulty level in this game on the gameplay is just extremely bizarre. The cars here, you know, it really just depends on where you're at in the game. I mean, there are some cars that you are playing like at the very beginning of the game in which they were just so much faster than they should be compared to all the other racers that you compete against. And you know, for some reason, you know, sometimes when you are racing, if you get far enough out, like maybe like 5 or 6 seconds far out from the rest of the competition, you pretty much reach the point where they are not going to catch you unless you completely screw up at the ending and you just win by a near landslide or something like that. I mean, come on, there needs to be at least a little bit of action that takes place during the races and all the sprints and all that stuff. Not only that, in all the police chases, unlike games like Need for Speed Most Wanted, police here are just completely irrational. I mean, you hear a good amount of chatter that's going on the radios in regards to what's going on with the police officers, but unfortunately the actual chase scenes themselves, the police cars and the police officers themselves, they were completely irrational. In fact, in most times, chases would be over within less than a minute or so, and there are times in which you're trying to pursue a police chase, but yet for some reason you're not able to complete your entire bounty or something like that because the police in this game, they just act completely stupid. I mean, look, in a Need for Speed game, you have to have police here because it's illegal street racing. You have incompetent police station and an incompetent police officer. It is going to be completely hard to see actual high-speed police pursuits here. I mean, it really is a complete drop of the ball on that department. And once you get to the very end of the game, particularly with all the highway stuff in which you're racing one-on-one against a whole bunch of these guys, for some reason it just gets so much harder, unfortunately. You know, all the cars that you go up against then look like that they should be much slower. They end up being a whole lot faster. I mean, the difficulty is probably one of the most bizarre things about this game. It starts easy, but for some apparent reason, it just takes it up a notch and it ends up being completely difficult to even complete at the very end of the game. In fact, there were a few times where near the final levels of this game, it had to take me multiple attempts just so that way I can be able to beat this game and stop this crime ring altogether. It's a shame. I mean, Need for Speed games are fun because usually of all the action that takes place, particularly with all the police pursuits and the street racing that takes place, you know, you combine them together and it works perfectly. You have yourself a great Need for Speed game. Here, it seems like they try to add a little more to that in Need for Speed Undercover, and unfortunately, it just throws the entire thing off. And as a result, Need for Speed Undercover ends up being completely underwhelming compared to all of its predecessors. Then it's all the cars and the settings of the game as well. You know, the environment that takes place in the game as well. I mean, first off, it rarely, unlike most of the other past Need for Speed games, I mean, just like Most Wanted and Hospital Pursuit 2, in this game, it takes place during the day. And honestly, if there's one thing that I can tell from some of the best Need for Speed games, the best of those games in those franchise, they usually take place at night, in my opinion. I mean, Underground is probably a perfect example of that, but there are times where they manage to pull it off during the day as well. Like, for example, Need for Speed Most Wanted. That was a really good game. It really just put everything together and really made it look like a very good Need for Speed racing game. Here it is also in the day, but it really feels like that, you know, it just doesn't fit compared to all the other Need for Speed games. I mean, with everything that's going on is comparatively in the city of San Francisco or Los Angeles, whatever fictional city this was, it doesn't really gel well with the overall feeling of this game. It feels like it's more pedestrian, in my opinion, and because of that, it makes it feel a little bit more bland than it really should be. Not only that, as I said before, it's a fictionalized version of San Francisco or Los Angeles or something like that. You know, it's really in the middle of a city, and also some areas as well where it feels like a park or maybe maybe even like a forest or something like that, where you're driving around, going a whole lot of that stuff. I mean, literally, it's almost a mixture of everything that you've seen in past Need for Speed games, but I just don't feel like that this setting really feels right, unfortunately. I don't know why, but it just feels like that is off. Like, there are places like Rockport City in Most Wanted, as well as other places in Underground, and even in Carbon as well, which also was not as good as the should have been, but was good enough to at least make it worthwhile, that it at least made the environment and the setting about it, made it real intense. Here, it just felt like that there was absolutely nothing going on, unfortunately, and as a result, the entire mood just felt down as a result. And finally, there wasn't a whole lot of good cars, unfortunately, that I could get to play in this game, you know. There was just like very few as a result. In fact, I heard that during development, because of all the struggles that they were going on around there, and I'll talk more about development in a little bit, they actually had to cut a whole bunch of vehicles that they were planning to add to this game from the final package of this game as a result. And unfortunately, as a result, it led to very fewer cars in this game that you got to drive as a result. And so there were times where you may just have to be stuck with 1 or 2 cars to play with this entire game. As I said before, like I said, with the gameplay and all of that stuff, there are cars where are completely overpowered and are much faster than you think, and then there are cars where they are just too damn slow. And really, that's just a problem. You have to have a good mixture of cars that make it feel real competitive, but also enough to create some really good races. But there's just way too many of those differences with the lineup here in this game. So unfortunately, because of that and the setting, I just feel like that it makes this game a lot worse and probably a lot more difficult than it should be. Next up is the graphics. Oh boy, I really talk about the graphics for every single game, but I have to do it again here. In a PlayStation 3 game, and remember, this is still during the early days of the PlayStation 3. This was released in 2008, so you would think that EA and Black Box during this time, they would be able to figure out the PS3 graphics, particularly with the engine that they use to be able to make these games. You would expect this to be much better graphic-wise than most other games during that time. Unfortunately, this makes it feel like that you're playing on a completely different console. In fact, the graphics of this game make it feel like that this was playing on a PlayStation 2 game. In fact, these are literally PS2 graphics that you are playing on here in Need for Speed Undercover. It really feels completely off, and that's a real shame, because with the PlayStation 3 and all the engines that you use to be able to develop these games, I would have thought that this would be a whole lot better. Not only that, it makes it feel like that the sun in Need for Speed Undercover, it makes it really too bright at times, unfortunately, and it's just really affecting your vision, and as a result, it makes it hard for you to be able to get around traffic and all that stuff. You end up hitting into a whole bunch of cars and some other rivals for no apparent reason, all because the colors in this thing are just way too bright, unfortunately. As a result, it just makes it very hard to see. As a result, you just get these mixed opinions, and you just get these mixture of views that really makes it feel completely unnecessary, and as a result, Need for Speed Undercover's graphics are just completely trash as a result, and unfortunately, it does not make this thing good at all. Finally, as I said before, all 4 of what I just mentioned, you know, the graphics, as well as the gameplay, the story, and everything else in regards to setting all of that stuff, they're bad enough alone, but those only happens because of poor development, and unfortunately, that is exactly what happened with Need for Speed Undercover. This is Electronic Arts and Black Box that developed this game. One of the best publishers in the video gaming industry, and one of the best developers at the time as well when it comes to arcade racers and a whole bunch of other video games as well. You would not expect a bad game like this out of those two, and unfortunately, you get that right here. Development for Need for Speed Undercover was just a complete mess, unfortunately. You know, there were a whole bunch of issues that were going around when it came to, you know, just making sure that everything with this game was right, and as I said before, you know, with all the big list actors, that you would usually expect a much better acting in this game than you would think. But unfortunately, as I said before, somewhere in the script writing and somewhere in like the process of all of that, unfortunately made it work like that the entire script was just completely made up just for the sake of at least having something for the actors to say in this game. And as a result, it just made the acting feel off. And with all the technical glitches that happen in this game as well, you know, it just makes it feel like that it was very unnecessary cheating that takes place place in this game. And as I said before, all those problems, all the patches that they had to fix, they had to take out a lot more than they would have put in as a result. As I said, less cars as a result of this. You know, there was supposed to be a huge list of cars that are in this game. Unfortunately, a lot of it had to be chopped off because of development issues. As a result, because of the poor use of their engine as well, or everything else, Need for Speed Undercover, unfortunately, in my opinion, is probably the single worst game in the Need for Speed franchise. I mean, I've looked at the reviews on Wikipedia. This game probably has the worst rating out of all the games in the franchise altogether, not just on Metacritic, but on all the consoles that is available to play on. In fact, I've heard from some people that the PlayStation 2 version of this game is actually a lot better than the PlayStation 3 version of Need for Speed Undercover, and that is a real shame. Electronic Arts is one of the best video game publishers there is because they let their developers take their time in developing the best game that they possibly can. They make sure that everything works perfectly, and they do not release the game unless the developers tell them that they think it is 100% ready to go out there to the retail stores for a purchase for all the gamers to play around the world. Unfortunately, something must have went off during this process because as a result, it made it feel like that it was completely rushed so that way they can get this out for the holiday season, because usually Need for Speed games will usually come out in November. And so there must have been some sort of problem that was going on there that had to make EA force Black Box to rush this game out just so that way they can get this in time for the holiday season. And as a result, this looks like a completely unfinished game. I mean, I'm shocked over that. I would have not expected this out of EA and Black Box, but unfortunately, that's what you get with Need for Speed Undercover, and as a result, it is such a real shame. This game could have been so much better, in my opinion, if everything in this game was just executed perfectly. And unfortunately, not only did they half-assed it, they unfortunately put in a very bad effort as a result. The Need for Speed franchise will go down as one of the greatest of all time, probably one of the greatest video game arcade racer franchises of its time. You know, it may not be as good as the likes of Burnout and Grand Theft Auto, but it does enough to be able to produce a lot of fun and a lot of action. Like Hot Pursuit 2, probably the earliest known example of this, and then you get games like Underground, Underground 2, Most Wanted, and a lot of other PS3 games that came out after Undercover, like the remakes of Hot Pursuit and Most Wanted. They usually take the time to make sure that they work right, and as a result, you get games with great police chases, great racing action, and just a whole lot of fun. And it's a video game franchise to remember for a reason. But unfortunately, it does have its woes, and unfortunately, Undercover is the epitome of that. Just poor setting, poor development, poor activity that takes place in this game, and as a result, this is probably a Need for Speed game that would have been best if it had at least another year of development instead of being released in 2008 the way it is. I mean, the only good thing I can say about Need for Speed Undercover is its soundtrack, and that's usually during the racing and all of that stuff. It produces a really, really good track list of great rock songs and a whole lot of other music as well. So that's a positive I will take away from this, but unfortunately, everything else, you are not expecting a Need for Speed game to end up like this. Obviously, this is EA, so they were able to bounce back from this and make a whole lot more good Need for Speed games. They haven't had a release since 2019, so I would expect sometime later this year or maybe next year or in the future that we will see another release in the Need for Speed franchise. Hopefully that's soon, but hopefully we do not see another game like this one. This is probably the low point of the Need for Speed franchise. Need for Speed Undercover was a poorly produced and a poorly developed game, and as a result, it is another bad game that ends up sitting in my collection. This is just one of many bad games that I have in my collection, so I'd like to hear from you. What other games would you like for me to review? Whether it's bad games or even good games as well. What games would you like for me to review? Feel free to let me know down in the comments. I'll take a look at those, and hopefully I will do a review on them at some point. Anyways, that's going to do it for another video. I hope you all enjoyed it. As always, if you'd like to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when my latest video is released. Comment below for future suggestions for all my videos, whether it's vlogs, projects, or challenges, you name it, leave it in the comments below and I'll do my best to make them. As always, follow me on my social media, all the links are in the description below. That's going to do it for another video. I hope you're all having another great day. As always, I hope to see all of you get another video very soon. And if you're a Need for Speed fan, I would really think wisely before picking this game up. So long, everybody.